welcome to Café con Tampa Online. I'm Bill Carlson, and Del Acosta is going to introduce our guests.
Thank you, Bill, and welcome everybody to our Café con program today, this Wednesday. Today we have two engineers with the City of Tampa, Vic and Ben. Both of them are engineers with the City of Tampa Mobility Department. Vic, why don't you introduce yourself first and the role that you play with the city, and then Ben, why don't you follow?
Sure thing, and thank you all for inviting us to speak. My name is Vic Bide, Director of the Mobility Department with the City of Tampa. If the term Mobility Department is new to you, it's because it's new to the city as well. Mayor Castor started this department about 6 months ago and really wanted to reflect the theme of how people move about our city and the things that impact them, and put that all under one department. So we consist of parking, transportation, operations, and stormwater. And of course, we're going to speak about stormwater. Why stormwater? Because roadways convey stormwater into the stormwater system, and Ben's going to touch upon that as well. So again, thank you. I'll hand it to Ben.
Sure. Thanks, Vic. My name is Ben Alashewski. I'm a stormwater engineer with the City of Tampa Stormwater Engineering Division. I'm in the planning side of the engineering department, of the mobility department. A lot of different branches, but it's great to be here today, and thank you guys for having us.
Great. Well, Ben, I think you have a short presentation you want to take us through, and then we can ask questions. For anybody listening, please hit the share button, the like button. We do this as a community service so that folks can get information. And this is an important topic that people in the community are interested in. It's been asked for repeatedly by the community. So please hit the share button. And also, if you have any questions, if you're watching this live, 4 o'clock on Wednesday, ask us by posting either underneath the feed or to the right, depending on how you're watching it. So Ben, off to you.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this works here. Alrighty. So thanks again, Bill, and thank you to everyone joining us today. It's a pleasure to be invited to speak with you all. As stated previously, my name is Ben Alashewski with the City of Tampa Stormwater Engineering Division. Today I'm going to be discussing all things stormwater as it relates to the City of Tampa. I'm going to talk about sustainability and resilience, sea level rise. I'm going to talk about our stormwater assessment program, which is really important, with an overview of the major capital improvement projects currently underway in the city. I'll also briefly discuss new changes coming to our FEMA floodplain maps that everyone might be very interested in, especially if you're in the coastal area of the city. And lastly, I'm just going to discuss general stormwater and drainage issues as it relates to Tampa, and I'll mention some ways that you can get in contact with our department. So Transforming Tampa's Tomorrow, or T3, this is Mayor Castor's new approach to addressing key issues facing our city. The mayor has formed an advisory team. It's made up of City of Tampa staff, community leaders, and subject matter experts in order to find smart solutions to improve the quality of life for our community. The main goal of the teams is to create and carry out a visionary plan for Tampa's future. The mayor's 5 primary focus areas, you can read them right here on the screen: transportation, development services, workforce development, housing and affordability, and sustainability and resilience. As you can see, I have sustainability and resilience in bold here with the yellow arrow, because this is the area directly related to stormwater management, and that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. So to expand more on sustainability and resiliency, just a few months ago, the City of Tampa hired our first ever S&R officer, Whit Remmer. Whit's position is a new senior level position that will oversee the management of S&R at the City of Tampa. This is extremely important, as Whit will be in charge of implementing the city's S&R roadmap, as well as developing a Tampa climate action and resilience plan. I can tell you that the Stormwater Department will definitely be working with Whit in the months and years to come as we tackle these difficult stormwater management issues. So to kind of build more on the sustainability and resiliency, the City of Tampa is committed to finding ways to build a stronger, greener, and more resilient city. As our city grows, we want to ensure that we're implementing sustainable practices that can be scaled as our population grows in the future. This will allow us to meet the needs of a growing city while supporting critical services that are essential to daily life. Part of this commitment involves identifying what we call green infrastructure solutions to more efficiently manage stormwater runoff. That is rainfall that doesn't soak into the ground and runs off on hard surfaces like asphalt and concrete. And we're looking at ways to begin incorporating these into a lot of our new stormwater projects. And one of those examples I just wanted to show you today is what we call Pervious Pavement. I have a little cross section here that shows you how that works. It's basically a new technology. Well, not necessarily new, but it's becoming more popular around our city and the country, definitely. But you basically take what we call a pervious surface of asphalt or concrete that allows rainfall and water to seep through easily that surface. And then we underlay it with natural soils and gravel and sand and rock so that water can seep into the groundwater instead of running off on the surface and creating more flooding. I've got another example here of green infrastructure. This is just a picture of a stormwater pond, I call it. It's in South Tampa. We just installed this a couple years ago. We really are really proud of this. We planted, well, basically there were 2 lots here that repetitively flooded. And so the city acquired those lots, demolished the homes, and then was able to turn it into a stormwater pond with native plant species that captures and treats runoff before it enters Tampa Bay. So it's a really cool kind of way to, in areas like South Tampa, we don't have a lot of space for things like retention ponds. So when we can turn areas that used to flood into areas like this with really resilient infrastructure, it's a great thing, and it helps flooding, and it also improves our water quality. Next, I'm going to get into sea level rise a little bit, as it's kind of a new threat that we're dealing with. Sea level rise isn't necessarily new, but it's something that we're really focusing on now, citywide, and especially as with the stormwater department. So sea level rise, we're just now starting to kind of figure out what the impacts are going to be, especially on our stormwater system. Recently, there was a study done where they pulled some data from a coastal tide gauge over in St. Petersburg, and it showed that since 1946, there's been almost 8 inches of sea level rise just in the Tampa Bay area, which is pretty incredible if you think about it. The Tampa Bay Regional Planning Commission did a study where it showed there can be a rise of anywhere from 2 to 8.5 feet of sea level rise by 2100. So when you think about that, between 2 and 8.5 feet, that's a big difference. But even if you just think about 2 feet of the sea level rising, that's pretty major, and it has a huge impact on our stormwater system. Any sea level rise is going to impact critical facilities close to the coast, Tampa General Hospital being one of them. The city did a study, and we saw that 31 local roads are going to be at risk from sea level rise in the coming years. So it's really something that we need to start thinking about and preparing for, and changing our ways for how we're going to design stormwater projects going forward.
Ben, if I could jump in here real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want this to be conversational, as this format has been. But a quick thing on sea level rise, I think oftentimes we think about sea level rise in terms of the shock, which is what happens if, the sea level rises 2 feet, 3 feet, whatever, that number might be, and what will that mean for our coastline? But really what we need to start thinking about, and we're feeling this already in our region, are the stressors. Meaning if you're on low-lying property at 2 or 3 foot elevation, what it will mean is the way that 7.8 inches in St. Petersburg measurement or projections manifest is when you have high tides, when you have wind-driven tides, it is going to impact the stormwater system's ability to drain water. In fact, in some cases, that water comes out of inlets as well. And you see daylight or daytime flooding. And you see this in places like Miami. We sit on the largest estuary in Florida. So these are impacts we have to start factoring into. And we know that the industry takes this seriously as well, because the insurance industry is factoring these impacts in as well. So we can make stormwater improvements, but at the same time, it's kind of critical that we be mindful of where we are, what our property is, what the elevation is, and what our threat matrix is, because it differs from place to place within our region.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Vic, for that. I'm planning on addressing, kind of the ways that we're going to deal with stormwater in the future when we design stormwater projects. And you hit on all of them right there. If our sea levels start rising, all of our coastal outfalls in the city, that's how all the stormwater drains in the city. And if the tide's already high and we have a higher sea from that, it's going to make it really hard for the land to drain. So it's really, really important to consider these things. So I'm going to keep rolling along here. The Planning Commission came out with a couple of graphics here. They're sort of like doomsday graphics. You don't want to get too hooked on these, but it gives you a really good representation of what, 4 feet of sea level rise and then what 8 feet of sea level rise is going to look like. There's a little picture here of the Riverwalk in downtown Tampa, and with just 4 feet, 4 feet, that's a lot, but with 4 feet, the Riverwalk is going to be completely underwater. 8 feet, obviously the same, but even worse. All these areas in light blue around Town and Country, West Shore, Bay Shore, Davis Island, they're all going to be impacted by sea level rise. So it's something we need to start looking at and thinking about. I touched
those areas in blue that you just showed. Are those what you call as the coastal areas in the city of Tampa?
Yes, absolutely. Yep, those are the coastal areas. Town and Country, West Shore, parts of the Hillsborough River are affected by the tide and and things like that. So yes.
Thank you.
No problem. Some of the ways that the city has been starting to think about and address sea level rise over the past 10 years or so, we've been doing a bunch of different grants with different government agencies to start, examining the ways that sea level rise is going to impact our stormwater system. Back in 2011 here, we did a sustainability action plan with Atkins, an engineering consulting firm. The Hillsborough County Planning Commission, as I stated, we had a partnership with them to study these things. And recently, we just finished this up a couple months ago, but we hired a consultant and we got a $75,000 grant from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection to do a vulnerability analysis and resiliency strategy report to actually use computer models to simulate how high the sea level is going to rise and what kind of impact that's going to have on our existing and future stormwater systems. And then we also came up with some ways that we might be able to combat sea level rise, such as, raising minimum roadway elevations, looking at our seawall ordinances, redoing our codes and regulations, elevating buildings and structures, implementing more green infrastructure solutions are all things that we're thinking about. So the city is actively focused on addressing sea level rise. This mayor and administration have really stressed that, and we think it's really important going forward. If you guys don't have any more input on sea level rise, I'm going to jump over into our stormwater assessment program. So the stormwater assessment program is really important for us as a department. The city has 2 assessments for this department. One is the service assessment and the other is the improvement assessment. The service assessment was adopted in 2003, and it's an annual non-ad valorem assessment that pays for operations and maintenance of our existing stormwater system. These are things like street sweeping, retention pond maintenance, pipeline system cleaning, ditch maintenance, just to name a few. Things that you think about on an everyday basis that help keep our stormwater system functioning the way it ought to. But then in 2016, the city of Tampa adopted the Stormwater Improvement Assessment, which is also an annual non-ad valorem assessment, but it pays for stormwater capital improvement projects in our central and lower improvement basin. That's basically everything south of Fletcher Avenue in the city. This assessment is extremely important for us because it helps fund these large projects that we wouldn't be able to study or fund or build, without this assessment. So it's really important.
A quick point there, Ben. one of the things that I feel the Stormwater Division does really well, and where this assessment comes in very handy, especially the improvement assessment, is for the most part on these large projects, every dollar that we fund as Tampa towards this assessment, SwiftMud, or the state entity, the Water Management District, they match those dollars more often than not. And we're able to get much more out of this assessment, which is locally funded, by pairing it with state funds and get more done.
Absolutely, yep. We do a lot of our really big projects with the Water Management District, and they help us, fund these projects 50-50. So it's a really big deal, and the improvement assessment goes a long way in making that happen. I briefly wanted to show this slide just to kind of show what we've done so far in the third quarter of 2020, just from a maintenance standpoint with the service assessment. I'm not going to read every one of these stats out loud, but I touched on some of the things that our maintenance and operations folks work on every day. Ditches, ponds, pipes, pumps, pump stations, street sweeping. 16,000 feet of ditches maintained just in the third quarter of 2020. I mean, it's hard to think about that. Just how much it is, but our guys and gals do a really good job of keeping our system clean, and 4.5 tons of trash and illegal dumping removed from ponds, trying to keep ponds clean. Later, I'm going to give you guys some more information about how you can contact our department if you ever want to make a maintenance related request. But I just wanted to show this slide just to, give a nod to the hardworking people over there. They really do a lot.
And just a small side note to the community, if you see, large items tossed in ditches or ponds, the number at the end of the presentation, feel free to call, because what's going to happen is if you live in that area, at some point that large item, and we've had hubcaps, chairs, sofas, you name it, are going to get stuck within the stormwater system. And that is going to create unintended consequences and flooding. We see that typically early on in the season, but that's just something to be mindful of. If you see something in a ditch, let us know. And all of the ditches, we try to get them maintained and cleaned on a 30-day cycle. Also, thanks to the community, funded by the service assessment.
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks, Vic. I kind of wanted to just go through a few pictures of before and after that our maintenance crews do, just to kind of show, what we're talking about here. This is a ditch in the city here. You wouldn't think about it as a massive means of conveying a ton of stormwater, but in the before picture, you can see it here. It hasn't been properly maintained. It's all choked off, but our team comes in and cleans it out, straightens it out, seeds the banks, and this can really help and improve in water quality and flood protection. I'm just going to roll through some more here. Just really shows how amazing it is. In this one, you wouldn't even notice that there was a channel or a ditch even here. Cleaned out all the cattails, and got some more here. Here's an old dilapidated fence that was coming down. We replaced it with a new, really nice one. You can see in the background, the pond was all choked off by vegetation. We went in there and cleaned it out. I just find these pictures really satisfying. Here's one more. There was a ditch. It was all overgrown and needed to be cleaned out. We added some rocks here to stabilize the bank and have some erosion protection. Here's a couple pictures from Stormwater Outfalls, where these are the coastal areas that we were referring to earlier, where sea level rise is going to play a big deal. We keep them cleaned out with all these barnacles you can see that get all jammed up in there that can really, affect the way that stormwater flows in and out. Here's just one more. It's crazy. I mean, you wouldn't even think that these things were there, but our team goes in there and cleans it out. So it's pretty cool. I'm going to switch gears real quick to the stormwater improvement assessment and just kind of give you a rundown of what's going on with that. So as I said earlier, the improvement assessment funds large capital improvement projects in the central and lower basins, basically everything south of Fletcher Avenue. Right now we have 5 major CIPs in progress. The first one, just kind of working our way north to south, is what we call the North Tampa Closed Basin Flood Relief Project. This is an area that's historically has really bad drainage problems. We call it a closed basin because the only way that stormwater can leave this area is really through a sinkhole. So, it really complicates the drainage problems in this area, but we're trying to strategically acquire properties and turn them into retention ponds to alleviate some of the flooding. This is ongoing. We're doing this right now. The next one going south is the Southeast Seminole Heights Flood Relief Project. This is a really big project that we're in the design phase of right now. And we're also working with the Florida Department of Transportation on this one, FDOT, because it encompasses some parts of I-275. But there's a lot of really bad chronic flooding issues in the Southeast Seminole Heights neighborhood. So we're going to come in there and put in some new pipes to alleviate some of that flooding. Working our way further south, there's the Cypress Street Outfall project. That's another really big one that we have going on right now. It's actually under construction. They're in the area of Cass Street and Rome Avenue right now, over by the University of Tampa, south of 275 by Kennedy Boulevard. We have a lot of longstanding flooding issues right there. So we're putting in also really large pipes to alleviate some of that flooding. Another big project we have going on that I'm sure everyone that's driven in the city of Tampa knows about is the Dale Mabry Henderson trunk line project. It's part of the Upper Peninsula Stormwater Basin, and that project is also under construction right now. They are actually almost done with that project for the city portion. We are working our way east down Watrous right now, and then we're gonna stub out a pipe on Dale Mabry, and then Dale Mabry is a FDOT roadway. So they're going to come in after us and connect a large pipe to our system to relieve some of that flooding on Dale Mabry Highway. And then the last major CIP that we have going on is the Lower Peninsula project. That's actually 8 different projects within the Lower Peninsula region, which is basically Euclid Avenue South down to the Air Force Base. And there's a lot of flooding problems there too that everybody knows about. So we have 8 projects that are coming up to address that. We have our first large one, the Southeast Region project, that's in the design phase right now. So that we hope doing these projects is going to provide a lot of flood reduction benefit for the city. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the FEMA coastal floodplain maps that are getting updated for Hillsborough County right now. This is a really big deal that I hope everybody that's lives along the coast in our county is aware of. So this is actually a process that's led by Hillsborough County and FEMA, but it obviously affects the city of Tampa. So everybody needs to know about it. Basically, the coastal floodplain maps for the county right now are really old and outdated. The data that they used to make these maps was from back in the 70s and 80s. So it's really out of date. And we have really new technology that we're going to use, that FEMA and the county are using to update those maps. But those new floodplain maps will become effective in either the spring or summer of 2021. And so the county is advising people with homes built before June of 1980 to buy or renew flood insurance before the spring or summer of 2021. If you guys want any more information on these new floodplain maps, you can call the city's construction services division at 274-3100. And also, if you just do a quick internet search for Hillsborough County FEMA floodplain maps, it'll be the first hit right away. I was going to put the URL on here, but it's really long. But if you just do a quick internet search, it'll come up. So it's something.
Ben, it's kind of telling that, the county is already requesting the community to purchase flood insurance prior to spring of 2021. Can you interpret that a little bit more?
Yeah, so as engineers, we're not part of the insurance industry, but we can just say that these new floodplain maps that are coming out are going to take into account storm surge, wind, everything that's going to run up those waves on the coast. And so there's going to be a much greater risk for people that live close to the coast and also the Hillsborough River at the southern end, town and country, like I was saying, West Shore, Davis Island. The base flood elevation on these new maps is unfortunately going to be a lot higher, but it's fortunate for the people that are in these areas because it's going to demonstrate a much greater risk. And so buying or renewing a flood insurance premium is going to be to your benefit.
And there was a public hearing, or there were a series of, I guess there were public hearings where you could go to the libraries and see the flood maps. Are these the flood maps you're talking about?
That is correct. Yep. So I've got another slide right here that kind of shows the changes that are coming. Yes, that was a public hearing that was held by the county and FEMA. And they just kind of wanted to give people an update on what's going on. They reached out to every single parcel affected by these new changes. So on the left, you can see here, the areas in yellow and blue are what we deem the high risk flood zone, which is zones AE or VE, which is basically you have to have, if you have a federally backed mortgage on your home, you're required to buy flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program or a private provider. And then on the right graphic here, this is going to be the new coastal floodplain map. So you can really see here, especially on like Davis Island and on the West Shore, the floodplain extends a lot further east. So a lot of people are going to be affected by these new floodplain maps. But it's good and bad, like I said, because although you might need to buy flood insurance or you might pay more in flood insurance, that's might not be a bad thing because it reflects, you know, a more accurate risk for future flooding, especially for coastal and storm surge and things of that nature.
Hey, Ben, we're in our last 3 minutes. So if you have any more slides, show them, and then we'll try to squeeze in a question or two, and then we'll wrap.
Okay, thank you. Yep, I'll go through these really quick. Last one I just want to touch on was just general flooding in the city of Tampa. You know, I talked about some things earlier. Tampa's a really tough place to manage stormwater. We have a really old and undersized system that we're constantly replacing. But, you know, the city is really flat. It makes it hard to drain the land. There's also coastal and tidal effects like we showed earlier with sea level rise. It's going to be really, really tough to manage that going forward, but we're committed to it. We've also seen more frequent and intense storm events. We're not sure if that's related to climate change or other things, but it's happening. We've already had a really tough rainy season. So I just wanted to share these things. You know, managing stormwater in the city of Tampa is really difficult. And lastly, I just want to show this general slide. Like I said earlier, if you ever wanted to make any requests, stormwater or transportation related, give 813-274-3101 a call. There's also the email address there. And that's all I have.
Yeah, I think just so everybody knows, if there's flooding in your street, your kids are swimming like in a pool down the street or something, or call this number right away, and you all will come address that. Let me ask a question real fast. As new homes come in, they're building higher. Maybe you could quickly explain that. And then people who are in the area that have homes that have been there a long time are worried because they're not raised to a higher elevation. They're worried about water from the new home rolling into their yard. Can you explain what the rules are around that?
Absolutely. So it's a city code that you can't adversely impact your neighbor with new construction. So we have people and engineers that review plans for new developments, new homes, to ensure that they're not going to push floodwaters onto the adjacent property. That's a really big deal for us. We make sure that's adhered to all the time in new development. And as it relates to just general construction going higher, if a property is building a new structure that's in the high risk floodplain for FEMA, you're required to build 1 foot above FEMA's base flood elevation. Your finished floor elevation has to be 1 foot higher than the base flood elevation for insurance purposes, and obviously the risk. So there is a general trend of building higher, but we do it so you don't adversely impact your neighbor.
Del, do you have a final question?
Let's try to keep it quick. What can the average property owner, either a homeowner or a commercial property owner, do to help maintain good stormwater flow into the public system, such as removing debris and not having our yard men use the sewer system, use it? Just go ahead, you tell us.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Like grass clippings, it's illegal to dump those in curb inlets and drains and stuff like that. If you can keep things free of the drainage system and ditches like Vic was talking about earlier and report those issues immediately, we really appreciate that. From a water quality standpoint, if you can reduce the impervious surfaces on your property, maybe put some grass down where there used to be some old asphalt or concrete or something like that. That's going to make it's a small impact, but it has a big impact on the overall system if we can get enough people doing it. So you kind of have to think about what your construction and how your home's built and ways that you can help contribute to a good functioning stormwater system.
Vic, could you explain you're also the head of transportation, Outfall mobility. there are a lot of people who want their roads replaced, and there's a, what is it, 75-year timeline, unless the Alfred Station goes through. But there's like a 75-year timeline. But as the reason why you're in charge now of stormwater and mobility is so that there's coordination. Can you just explain that?
Yeah, sure. So, I'll explain it with like a couple of examples. But first, yes, you're right. We're transportation funding or lack of it thereof is a national concern, and it has to do with how the gas tax is administered and how the gas tax is leveraged. It has nothing to do with the price of gas, but the cost per gallon. So we don't benefit from inflation. But for one, stormwater is conveyed through city roads, so that there's a direct correlation on roadway profile and how well the stormwater system along that roadway would work. And now, in a place like Tampa, we're flat. We have a lot of trees, a lot of tree roots as well, which also impede sidewalks and roadways. So while we preserve our tree canopy, we're also mindful of its impact on roadways that also contributes to flooding. So not only is it conveyance, the canopy kind of impacts it as well. And so it really makes sense to look at transportation and stormwater as part of the same conversation, because oftentimes these facilities are related, and what happens with one impacts the other. So to that end, we're kind of in the same realm.
Great. Any final comments or thoughts? You still have your telephone number and I think email address up there. Any other final thoughts or recommendations for the public?
Sure. So one thing is, I would recommend that we take climate change seriously. It is impacting us right now. It is going to impact us even more. And there's really no silver bullet solutions. And I know that, there are examples from the Netherlands and elsewhere in terms of seawalls and things like that. But the scale at which we're looking at, in terms of impact over the next 50 years, it's the small things that are really going to help us. To Ben's point, having grass and green spaces are not only going to drain water better, they're also going to treat that water better in terms of quality, rather than depending on gray infrastructure. So yes, we're planning on gray infrastructure investments, but we really need to have an all of the above approach in tackling flooding and stormwater issues. You might be on mute, Bill.
Ben, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Vic was saying, as part of all of our stormwater large capital improvement projects, especially the ones that we fund with the Water Management District, water quality is always going to be a part of those projects, because SwiftMud's governing board really favors projects that incorporate some type of water quality component with those projects. So each of the 5 projects that I ran through earlier, our big CIPs, we incorporate some type of green infrastructure, water quality improvements to, help in that climate change aspect as we go forward. So, yep, that's all I got. And thank you guys for having us today.
Great. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Del. And thanks also to the Café on Tampa board for supporting us while we've been out. Hopefully we'll be back in person soon. And please, again, hit the share button so your friends can see this. See you next time.